Okay, so what's the deal with 3iAtlas? This is maybe the third video I've made about this. I decided to tap into 3iAtlas today and get some new information today on October 11th. And if you don't know me, my name is Jennifer Lisa Vest. I'm also known as the Ethical Psychic, and I'm a psychic medium and a medical intuitive, but I also have a background in astrophysics. I am not an astrophysicist, and everything I say in this video is allegedly and for entertainment purposes only. I had questions, and so I've done a couple of videos. You can check them out. The most recent one I did today, I was talking about the science. Like the question I had was, why aren't scientists telling us more about this? So I was watching some videos last night by some astrophysicists and just, looking up, the European Space Agency, the different, sources I might be able to find about what's going on. And my overall impression is that they are not being forthcoming. That's my opinion. And I find that a little sus. This is like the biggest astronomical event of our lifetime, probably. And I would expect a lot more in terms of press releases, photos, footage than we're seeing. So if you disagree with me and you think there is more info out there that I'm not accessing, let me know in the comments and give me some sources because I'm not finding them. And so I decided to tune in to 3iAtlas today for the second time and to ask some questions about science, about what it means for us, who they are, what it is, what's going on. And so as I discussed in my last video, they explained to me that the scientists actually do have some data which lets them know that this is neither a comet nor an asteroid. And a couple of things they mentioned was a redshift, which was not consistent with the theory or the hypothesis of a comet or an asteroid. And they also mentioned something about the outgassing. Now, I don't have access to that data, so obviously I can't point to it. But I did specifically ask the guides, like, what kind of evidence do they have that would cause them to doubt that it's a comet or an asteroid? So they pointed to those two kinds of information. But I want to move on to something more that they said about what's going on with the scientists, allegedly. And another thing and when I say they, I'm talking to 3iAtlas. As I shared in my last video, they said one way to think of them as a sentient rock. I was also told in a previous channeling that they are an intelligent being from another, star system. I was not given any details beyond that about who they are. I know that there are some other psychics out there who are saying these are reptilians, or these are Galactic Federation, or these are interdimensional beings, etc. I can't can confirm or deny those specific claims based on my channeling, but I can tell you what I got. And one of the things I got was that they're okay with us thinking of them as a rock careening through space, that they do have a kind of mineral or metallic body, but they're not an inanimate object. They are a sentient being. And so I asked, some more questions about the science because, that interests me. I'm always wanting to know, when does the information that the intuitives get match up with what the scientists get? That's always what I'm looking for. I don't think they should contradict. I think if everybody is actually sharing the data, we should be able to see that one backs up the other. So when I asked about, well, if they have this evidence that it's not a comet or an asteroid, then what's going on? Why aren't they sharing more data with the public? Why aren't there more press releases? Why aren't there more academic papers coming out? We did have a lot of academic papers in July and some in August, but in terms of like September, October, we don't have as many. This is the impression I've gotten based on what papers people are citing. So people are not citing papers from October or from the end of September very much. They're mostly citing papers from July. and some from August. And so I have questions about that. Like, where's the new data? Where are the new papers? With something this exciting happening and with so many telescopes looking at it, I would expect to see a really high output of papers coming out on this topic. So that was my question. One of my questions, the 3iAtlas, is, why aren't we seeing that? And again, if I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. If you know of papers, put them in the comments. Give me the sources. So prove me wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. I'm okay with being wrong. I'm just, have questions. I got a lot of questions, and I think they're interesting. So when I asked this question, what they said to me was that the scientists are at this point where they're pretty clear that it's not a comet or an asteroid, but they don't know what it is, right? And so I'm just going to kind of look more closely at the notes from the channeling that I did. So they're just getting lots of data. And what that data is all showing right now is that this is not something they're familiar with. That's really the only conclusion they can make at this time, is that it's not a comet, it's not an asteroid, it's not anything they've ever studied, it's not anything they're familiar with. And so they're kind of being pushed against the edge of what they know, which makes them very uncomfortable because, scientists are kind of taught to think that they know certain things and that they have a command of what's out there. Like, even if there are new discoveries, there is this general belief that most of what we know is accurate, right? And then there are some things that we have to tweak over time. But that's not really what they're facing right now. They're facing something that is just proving to them that they just don't know. They just don't know. And so when they look at the outgassing and they look at the different characteristics of this moving body, it doesn't match anything they've ever seen. And this is why they're silent. They don't know what to say about it. They don't want to say it's artificial. There's a really strong bias against ETs, right? So within the science community, they don't like to talk about that, and they make fun of people who do. And so, like, the Harvard professor Avi Loeb, who came out and said, oh, there's a 40% chance that this could be an extraterrestrial craft that's artificially constructed. A lot of people are, making fun of him or talking bad about him and saying, don't listen to him, he's crazy. So they definitely don't want to go down that route. But they, 3iAtlas also told me that they don't necessarily think it's artificial because it does have these properties of being organic, right? So they are seeing properties of a rock. They are seeing minerals. They are seeing certain things that indicate it's natural, but they're also seeing a lot of properties that they've never associated with natural astronomical objects. So they don't really know what they're looking at, and they don't really know what to say. And also, they're not comfortable with the idea that rocks could be sentient. So they don't know what to make of data they're getting, which says this is a rock, and then other data that's saying, no, this is a like organic being, right? Like, how do they make sense of that? Is it an animal? Is it a vegetable? Is it a rock, right? What are the three things? Animal, mineral, vegetable. Which one is it? Science says it should be one and only one. And so how can it act like it's alive or like it's organic and then still be a rock? What do we call that? So the way it was explained to me is that, science has zoology information. They have a very good understanding of all of the living, creatures, the animals on the planet. And then they also have a lot of geological information. They have a very good understanding of rocks and minerals. But what they don't have is geological, zoological, astronomical information in their databases. And so the data they're picking up is saying, this is a mineral. it's saying this is a mineral, this is geological, but it's also presenting properties that are more zoological, like an animal. And it's also not really following the kind of astronomical data in terms of how objects move through space and how they're impacted by gravity. So there are just a lot of anomalies. Um, and they talk specifically about forces. So they explain that, it's responding to forces, and it also appears to have its own forces. And this is where the scientists are really getting shaken, because physics has what it thinks is a very clear understanding of all the forces of nature. And so, we have the strong force, we have the weak force, we have gravity, we have electromagnetism, right? We have this idea that we know what the forces are. And so when they're, mapping any type of, you know, astronomical object, they are able to, kind of apply what they know about how objects behave because their knowledge of forces, right? So, for example, they have certain expectations about the way that this comet should move when it gets near the sun because of gravity. So, that's because they have a certain understanding of that force. So, they have expectations about what they expect to see given what they know about, like, the impact that the sun should have on this object. So what does sublimation look like? How much outgassing should there be? um, how will this thing's trajectory be influenced by the forces that they're aware of? And so what I was told was that its trajectory is not currently explainable solely by the forces that they understand. And that it's making some of these astrophysicists question whether or not they truly understand all the forces that exist. And this is major, right? This is, paradigm shifting potentially. And so when it comes to something like this, where in order for someone to write a paper about this, they're going to have to challenge existing kind of scientific paradigm, doctrine, existing knowledge, or they're going to have to propose something that's very unpopular, like the idea of an artificially manufactured craft. A lot of scientists would just rather not. And so, and this is just my opinion, but it's, this is what I'm picking up when I'm tuning in, when I'm channeling 3iAtlas. And, you don't have to believe me, but I'm just sharing this because I specifically asked them, what should I share? What can you tell me that I can share with people that would be helpful? And because I think a lot of us have questions about what is this thing, where is it headed? Why aren't we hearing more about it? Why are we getting so few pictures? Why is the image so grainy? Like, we have all of this incredible state-of-the-art equipment on Mars and in space near Mars, and we can't pick up any good images. It's just, I don't know. It's a little sus. So this is what they told me. They said that, a lot of scientists are going to be very wary to kind of put forth a paper with a hypothesis that's that kind of groundbreaking without enough data, enough time to look at the data. And so there's a real hesitancy. And since they don't know what to say, they're just choosing not really to say much at all. And so I did also pick up that they're working on a consensus. And so several kind of top name scientists at different facilities around the world are in conversation about what can we agree about this? Like, can we all agree on X, Y, and Z? Can we all agree this is not a comet? Can we all agree this is not an asteroid? Can we all agree that the trajectory is not explainable by our present scientific knowledge of forces. Can we all agree, right? What can we agree on? And they're working on, developing a consensus that they can then share with the public. So I asked, well, when are we going to get information from the scientists? And I got that, when it's on the dark side of the sun, like that, I heard that song, Dark Side of the Moon. And so they were saying that the time that it's going to spend behind the sun, kind of obstructed from our view because of the sun, which I think is till the end of October 29th, I believe, that between now and then, the scientists are going to have time to really study the data, have conversations with one another, try to build up a consensus about what they're seeing, and that we should expect to hear something maybe in early November. Now, they did talk a lot about how, reputation and career and money are all key factors in the scientific community. And so a lot of people are not going to speak up and say something that's considered wildly, um, you know, uh, different from what we have understood until now about interstellar objects. And so there's just a lot of people who are afraid, either because they might ruin their reputation, it might ruin their career, it might affect their funding. And so one of the things that I got was that the astronomer, astrophysicist, whoever it is that's going to kind of be the first to share some information about how this really isn't what they've been saying it is, that it's not actually a comet or an asteroid, but maybe it's something else, that I got that person was going to be from like a place that's not prominent, a scientific or research facility or university that is not prominent and is not, one of the top ones. And I got that maybe it was going to be like Australia or Tasmania or someplace in that part of the world, down under. And that's because that person, that scholar will have less to lose, or they'll think that they have less to lose by kind of going out on a limb and saying something that might sound kind of crazy to other scientists who aren't ready for a paradigm. So this is what I got in my channeling session that related to my questions about why aren't the scientists talking more? What's going on with them? What are they picking up in terms of data? Now, I did also, ask more questions about the star seeds and what our role is. And so I'm gonna share that in my next video. And I just wanted to focus on these questions I had about the science. So if you didn't watch the video right before this, just want to remind you that there were 2 bits of data they shared with me that they say the scientists have. One had to do with outgassing and one had to do with a redshift, and that these 2 kinds of data have made it clear to the scientists that this is not a comet, this is not an asteroid, and this is not anything they have ever seen before. So I would love to hear in the comments what else you're picking up. If you're a channel, what are you picking up? And also if you're a scientist or you're up to date on the science and you have seen some other sources that contradict me or that add to what I'm saying, please share those, because I am searching for more information. And the more information we have, the better. Normally, we would have a press release from NASA. We would have a press release from the European Space Agency. China would have put out a press release. Maybe India, Russia. There's a lot of science programs out there that could have been putting out press releases. But in the absence of that, we are left to our own devices to try to make sense of this. So I know there's a lot of kind of amateur astronomers out there who are using their own telescopes and trying to, theorize and hypothesize what is going on. But there's also a lot of psychics out there, a lot of intuitives, dreaming women like myself, who are also tuning in. And I think this is really exciting. I do have more to say about that in my next video.